stock markets opened just a few minutes ago, and it's not pretty.
China just released a new AI model that has led US AI companies like OpenAI, as well as chip suppliers like Nvidia, to shed trillions of dollars in value overnight. So, did China just pop the AI bubble? To answer that question, we first need to ask ourselves some hard questions. Was there actually an AI bubble to begin with? And if so, did China pop it? Or will AI stocks bounce back before we know it? To answer these questions, let's first do a quick recap of what actually happened. First, let's talk about the technology. In 2022, OpenAI shocked the world with the launch of its advanced AI chatbot, ChatGPT, built on the back of innovations in so-called large language models, LLMs for short. Over time, LLMs got more powerful and more power hungry, leading to an unprecedented boom in the valuation of mostly American companies that either built, ran, or provided the infrastructure to power these models. But then, over the course of the last 2 months, 2 new versions of the Chinese DeepSeek LLMs were released alongside various Chinese alternatives. These models rivaled the performance of America's latest and greatest models, but even more importantly, they were far cheaper to train and to run, leading to a massive sell-off in American AI infrastructure stocks like Nvidia. However, if we zoom out a bit, we can see that so far that sell-off, while big, does not really seem that bad. So was this all just a panic, soon to be forgotten, or is this the start of the end for America's AI bubble? To answer that question, we first need to answer, was America's AI sector in a bubble to begin with? According to ChatGPT, a bubble refers to a situation where the price of an asset, such as stocks, real estate, or cryptocurrencies, rises significantly above its intrinsic value due to excessive speculation, investor enthusiasm, and or irrational expectations. And yes, I made sure that ChatGPT was not hallucinating on that definition. Anyway, one of the most famous bubbles in recent history was the dot-com bubble in 2001, during which hundreds of companies made close to zero revenue and yet were valued at millions of dollars simply because they promised to do something with the internet. Crucially though, some companies that were highly valued in the overall stock market bubble turned out to be actually correctly valued because they indeed would become tech titans of today. Therefore, in hindsight, we can say that while the 2001 tech hype was a bubble because investors were wrong about most companies that were part of that bubble, the overall bet on the internet as a technology and some companies within them proved to be correct. To make matters even more tricky, we can never be completely sure whether or not we are in a bubble right now, because we do not know what the intrinsic value of any company is, because it is based on future profits, which are inherently uncertain. That being said, economists who use bubble detection algorithms have certainly found strong signs of bubble-like behavior in US tech stocks today. However, before DeepSeek arrived on the scene, there were good reasons to believe that much of the AI industry was not in a bubble. Now, to understand why, we first need to talk about the pre-DeepSeek economics of AI, where 3 types of companies were emerging as the big AI winners. The first were model providers like OpenAI or Anthropic, which trained huge large language models and then provided light user access to it via subscription services while charging power users for each time that they used the models via their APIs. These model providers needed to train their models using huge data servers provided by the cloud providers, which in turn relied on Nvidia graphics cards. But much like the tech giants who survived the last tech bubble, what really made these companies valuable is not their technology, but rather the fact that they are protected in some way from competition. For example, eBay and Amazon were protected by so-called network effects, which meant that their product marketplaces worked better the more people that used it. However, so far it seemed like the AI titans were shielded from competition in a different way, by the massive capital required to train and run these models, build server centers, and develop state-of-the-art graphics cards. This made their business models more like that of Airbus and Boeing than that of Facebook. Airbus and Boeing are less profitable than Facebook, but they are still extremely profitable and very well protected from competition due to high barriers of entry from capital. So in that sense, the sky-high valuations for big model providers, data center providers and NVIDIA were arguably not a bubble, at least up to the DeepSeek model release. So how did DeepSeek disrupt the economics of AI? Well, interestingly, DeepSeek did arguably not disrupt the economics of AI first. It was actually OpenAI itself that changed the economics of AI when it released its o1 model in late 2024. You see, o1 is a so-called reasoning model, which is different from the LLMs that came before it, because it reasons more like a human being, meaning that instead of being extremely expensive to train, it is extremely expensive to run. But given that the big model makers were mainly protected by high capital requirements to train these models, this could have actually really endangered them already, if it wasn't for the fact that OpenAI does not openly share its models. However, this was no threat yet to the data service providers, nor to NVIDIA, because their chips and servers would still be needed to run OpenAI's new reasoning model. Therefore, ironically, OpenAI's new reasoning model initially seemed to vindicate the crazy investments in AI infrastructure and research. That is, until DeepSeek came out with its own open source, cheap to train and cheap to run, regular and reasoning model. And despite the fact that these models were still trained on NVIDIA chips, they were trained on much weaker, cheaper NVIDIA chips. On top of that, the Chinese models can in many cases even be run on consumer computers rather than on data servers, meaning that now the main line of defense for these three sectors of American champions is potentially gone. So while this is great news for LLMs as a technology and great news for companies that use or build services on top of these models, it just made the valuations of NVIDIA, cloud service providers and especially OpenAI seem irrationally high. So while the sector was arguably not completely in bubble territory before, it now all of a sudden looks a lot more like a bubble. A bubble that could very well deflate further now that it has become clear that competition will be fierce. However, popping this bubble may look very different for the companies that we have discussed. So far, the arrival of DeepSeek looks really bad for model providers like OpenAI because it showed that they are not as well protected from competition as previously thought. And while cloud providers and NVIDIA now face more competition as well because of the lower cost of running these models, they could actually be saved by the fact that cheaper models may mean more people want to start running these models, meaning that they need AI infrastructure to run them on. So actually, I would argue that China just popped parts of the AI bubble, not all of it. In fact, much like Amazon's valuations were not a bubble within the dot-com bubble, it could be that even if stock prices from giants like NVIDIA fall further, that they were technically never a bubble and that their stock price will come back with a vengeance in a couple of years' time. But then again, that is what it seems like to me right now. This is a new technology. The race to economically dominate this technology is far from over. So I'll keep you posted on any new developments. But in the meantime, if you want to dive deeper into the economics of AI, I highly recommend you check out the video sponsor of today, The Economist. Specifically for this video, I relied a lot on this amazing article about the economics of reasoning models, this deep dive on the market impact of DeepSeek, and this super interesting article about the other Chinese models that are rapidly being developed. All of these articles are linked in the top comment under this video, just alongside the link to our exclusive 20% discount to The Economist, which gives you full access to their daily in-depth global reporting for an entire year. The Economist has been part of my media diet long before I started this channel because they stand for independent journalism for independent thinkers. Whether you prefer to enjoy their print edition over a cup of coffee or their app's digital weekly edition, you'll always stay ahead of the news no matter where you are. So don't miss out. Click the link in the description of this video or top comment, or head over to economist.com/moneymacro to claim your exclusive 20% discount today.